Welcome to today's webinar, our game plan to enable smarter and safer IT in 2025. We're excited to have you here and as we explore key strategies to strengthen security and optimize your IT. I'm your host. My name is Adriana Wong. I'm the marketing manager at Inova Solutions. I'll be covering the welcome and opening remarks, the Q&A, and the final remarks. I now would like to introduce the speakers. We first have Gilbert. He is the founder and CEO of Arise Technologies. He'll be sharing some insight on the common IT challenges and opportunities in the Caribbean. Next, we have Jeroen. And many of us know him from a J. He is our territory manager of Inova Solutions, and he will talk about the value of Inova Solutions as a Microsoft partner and what it means for you. Next, and the last speaker is Nestor Diaz. He is the country manager of Puerto Rico in Inova Solutions, and he will walk us through a game plan on a smarter and safer IT for your organization. So we're in great hands today. Before we continue, I would like to invite Hans Kruithof because he has an announcement to make. Hans, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Adriana. And welcome to all our participants, our customers, our friends. Delighted to have you here. But before we delve into the insight of our esteemed speakers, I would like to share some exciting news with you. Inova Solutions has been well known and has a good reputation for expertise in Microsoft licensing and a deep understanding of Microsoft products and services already for over more than 15 years. Today, I'm excited to announce our latest strategic partnership with Rise Technology. Rise Technology is based in Bermuda and serves locations currently as Cayman Islands and Bahamas, and is going to help us to to complement our service portfolio. And this partnership will bring significant benefits for us and for you as a customer, particularly in enhancing our management service capabilities. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the microphone to Gilbert Darrell, my good friends and CEO of Rise Technologies. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Hans. It's a pleasure for Rise to be working with Inova. We couldn't find a better partner in the Caribbean and probably in the world for Microsoft Solutions, and I'm very proud to be working with you guys. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. My name is Gilbert Darrell. As Hans mentioned, I'm the CEO of Rise Technologies. We're a premier MSP and IT provider headquartered in Bermuda, but we service customers throughout the Caribbean and the United States and Canada. Like to talk about today the changing sands, shifting sands in the IT leadership space, and what us as IT leaders and those worried about IT in our organizations need to look out for. We have a lot of pressures facing us today from cybersecurity, AI, and hybrid work environments, all while trying to navigate challenges in our own regions. I obviously have intimate knowledge of Bermuda, Cayman, and other locations in the Caribbean, and for those of us who are working in these territories, we have a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of things we need to address. Next slide, Adriana, please. So today, we have to wear multiple hats in the IT realm. We have to be cybersecurity experts. We now need to be AI strategists and worry about where AI fits into our organizations. We need to be cloud architects. We need to worry about how we manage cloud. What does cloud look like in our organization? Do we move from on-prem to cloud or cloud to on-prem? How are we leveraging tools like MS Teams? How are we leveraging tools like SharePoint and OneDrive? We have to worry about costs. Budget constraints is certainly one thing that we're highly aware of. There's not endless money and there's not endless people to implement these things. We have regulatory problems. We have shifts in privacy. Bermuda, as one example, is going through a new privacy regulation called PIPA, which is a GDPR equivalent, and we'll talk about that a bit more. We have legacy infrastructure. We have cybercrime. The Caribbean, a number that I found striking was there's $90 billion a year in cybercrime in the Caribbean. So really, we need to look at the opportunities we have in front of us. We need to look at modernization of our architecture and our infrastructure, but also how do we grow our businesses and where does IT fit into all of that? Next slide, please. So really, we have three things to talk about today in general. We have security and compliance, we have the AI dilemma, and we have hybrid workforce and infrastructure. So AI is certainly probably the driving force, or will be in your organization. What are the benefits and what are the detractions of AI? I think we're probably likely to see more productivity from AI than we've seen in recent years with maybe any other solution or new technology. But what are the problems there? What are you worried about? Or what should you be worried about? Is your staff passing sensitive data to AI? Is that data secured in something like Copilot, or are they using third-party services and passing that data outside your organization? What are we doing with ransomware, phishing, and data breaches? Are you leveraging things like Sentinel and Defender in your organizations? Do you have an endpoint protection? Do you need to roll one out? Do you have a SIEM like Sentinel? Are you using a SOAR? What are you doing to protect your data and to have alerts? What's your backup policy look like? Are you having redundancy circuits? These are all things that I'm sure many of us are thinking about or trying to implement. We're also trying to get budget for. We have new data protection laws. Bermuda certainly has one that just was implemented called PIPA, but we have also new legislations in Jamaica, Bahamas, Trinidad, Tobago, and Bahamas that require us to not only shift our focus from the cybersecurity realm and now AI, but also we have to worry about compliance and regulation, which wasn't always entirely a problem for AI, for the IT experts and IT managers, but now it certainly is. And then we have the challenges of what we're working on with maintaining a hybrid environment. We have work from home. A lot of organizations are still have staff that are remote or are hybrid, and we need to worry about what that looks like in our environment. So really, we're looking at security and compliance as one of the major topics today. We talked about the new PIPA legislations that we're seeing in Bermuda and other compliances that we're seeing through the Caribbean. We talked about the cybercrime that even if that number is 50% accurate, can you imagine what $45 billion of lost revenue to your organizations looks like? It's a gigantic number. It's something that we need to really focus on and worry about how, even with these new tools like AI, how is that going to increase cybercrime? I mean, a very simple example is the amount of phishing and scam emails that your organization is now going to see is going to dramatically go up. The ability to turn out these emails, to automate them through simple CRMs, to have these threat vectors now be attacking your organization on a level that's unprecedented before is certainly something we need to be aware of. We don't have endless amounts of staff. It's hard to recruit sometimes in our region. It's hard to keep staff. We have big organizations in Bermuda, as an example, reinsurance and international banking, hedge funds, and the government who, might be looking at your staff and looking to recruit them. You train them up in your organization. They've done really well, but sometimes they might move. And how do we train new staff? How do we keep staff on board our organizations, but also make sure that they're, you have the ability to work through all these various big topics. And then we have, infrastructure risks. Bermuda has only a handful of submarine cables, and I know in the Caribbean, some islands are better off or worse off than we are in the Caribbean and other countries as well. So what are you doing to that? What are your options for infrastructure? It's certainly a risk. It's been flagged by the Atlantic Council as something that we need to take aware of. CARICOM certainly is an active discussion in CARICOM. And what are we doing to mitigate those risks? Where does your backup plan look like? Do you have redundant circuits? Are your circuits running over redundant submarine cables? What does your last mile infrastructure look like for your organization? These are all things you need to be aware of. And when it comes to work from home, are you using solutions like SD-WAN and virtual, WAN solutions to make sure that you have, a really tight infrastructure that keeps your data in a protected sphere? There's great solutions inside Azure to help with this, with software networking, to help your organization stay on top of these issues. Next slide, please. So AI, I'm probably preaching to the choir to some respect when it comes to the dangers of AI, but I can promise you your board and your executives are looking at the promise of AI and how it can increase your organization. it's certainly something we can't ignore. We can't stick our head in the sand and say we're not worried about it. But we also should implement it. I'm a big believer in AI. I think it's going to dramatically change the work landscape for the better. It's going to allow us to be more efficient. It's going to allow our technical teams on the IT side to be a lot more aware of problems, to find solutions faster, to have AI help them work through the problems that they're facing, not only from the technical side, but obviously on the production side of your organizations, the side of your business that makes money, and typically IT costs money. But this is really a great solution for us to turn to our executives and say, look, we can implement AI, we can implement things like Copilot inside Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive. How do we do that intelligently? We need to worry about that on the IT side, but we can also show a way to improve productivity with our executive teams using AI. So there's huge potential here, and I think we need to keep our eye on it. But we also need to make sure we're training staff up on AI. There's great classes from Microsoft on Copilot and generative AI and machine learning. I would highly recommend you reach out to Inova to look for those classes and to get education on that. But we need to keep on top of this. It's a very fast. I'm telling you probably something you already know. It's a very fast changing environment, but we need to keep an eye on it. And we need to make sure that we're looking for ways to defense to make sure that generative AI is not, taking our data, is not, we're not giving it willingly to these AIs that we don't have control over. Copilot is really great for that. Microsoft is doing a really great job on keeping that data inside of our tenants and our ecosystem. So things to look out for. Next slide, please. Hybrid work and infrastructure is a big topic. I mean, this is really where we need to find some harmony in our organizations. Remote work is not going away. We've all flexed very well post-COVID to make remote work possible. We have great tools, MS Teams, we have SharePoint and OneDrive. But how are we harmonizing that across the entire organization? How are we doing patch management? How are we doing monitoring? How are we doing defense? Are we putting endpoint protection on all of these machines? Are we leveraging the tools inside Intune? Are we leveraging a third-party patch management tool? There's great ones out there that can supplement your ability inside Intune. Are we using Defender and Sentinel to secure these environments? Are we using Azure Files, or are we leveraging Azure to really allow our staff to really work anywhere, but also work as effectively as possible? How are we handling patch management? How are we making sure these machines are patched, but obviously are online for our user base? We have a customer who has 1,000 laptops, and at any given time, 10 to 20% of them are not patched because people are moving around. How are we dealing with that? Staff are on vacation, or their laptop is broken, so it doesn't get patched. We need to keep on top of all these issues, and there's some really great tools to leverage inside of the Microsoft ecosystem to make that happen. So really, to put a capstone on today's conversation from my keynote, and then Jerome and when he goes through the solutions that he has, I think you'll see some reoccurring themes here. Inova with Jerome and Nestor have some great solutions for you, some great ideas to help you drive your organizations. But really, we need to look at these things in an opportunity, but also a protection mindset. We want to grow the business. We also want to protect the business. So we have I mentioned them already. We have great solutions inside the Microsoft ecosystem for cybersecurity. Many people are leveraging them, many are not. So if you're not leveraging these and you don't have a great solution set, a lot of these solutions come part of your Microsoft licenses. There's great third-party tools out there as well, but we can look at both options and find what's best for your organization. From a Microsoft standpoint, there's some solutions Microsoft doesn't always offer, and from an MSP standpoint, to make sure you're protected. We need to stay on top of AI. I mentioned that already. We can't let AI, we can't let the tail wag the dog. We need to be ahead of this. We need to be ensuring that we're providing the best solutions for our staff, but we also need to make sure they're protected. Hybrid workplaces, there's a lot of solutions for hybrid. Utilizing Teams and OneDrive and SharePoint are obviously base plate solutions to get your staff working, but you also need to make sure the endpoints are protected. You need to make sure you're rolling out patching in an effective manner. You need to be testing patching before you roll it out. You need to have a beta group of users inside your organization. Microsoft has been better in the last few years with rolling out safe patches, but I wouldn't recommend patching your organization without testing these patches first. And we need to look at how we can drive the business. IT is often looked at to your executive teams and your boards as probably a cost sink. I think now with AI, we have a chance to really turn the page on that and say, yes, IT and technology costs money, but you're going to be leveraging things like AI to improve the business, and IT can really help you do that and push the ball forward. So these are the top 4 concerns that we've heard from you. We've heard that we don't have great non-technical decision makers sometimes in IT. I get it. You have CEOs at a company who want to drive revenue and drive sales, but IT needs to be a part of that picture. And I think with AI, we can really show our value there. We need to maximize IT across the organizations. We need to be efficient, which is sometimes hard, and especially as organizations grow. And we need to automate tools. We need to automate things inside tools like Intune and Sentinel and Defender. Those are just simple solutions that we can roll out to really leverage efficiency across our organizations. We need to manage growth, but we need to do growth intelligently. We need to make sure that we're putting in the right checks and balances in our organizations as we grow. And then through that, I think with the right use case and the right business case to your organizations, we'll get funding for IT. I know it's not always easy. We have organizations now that have to replace large percentages of their desktops and laptops as Windows 10 gets sunset and Windows 11 comes around. Some of these things are being driven for us by technology, like AI, like Windows upgrades. But some of these things the business is going to drive. And we need to be sitting at the table with the decision makers and showing the value of IT, showing the compliance that we now are responsible for, showing the value that we can bring with new technology, and make sure that we're part of the conversation.
All right, Jay, we have Jeroen, who is going to be covering the value of Inova Solutions. Jay, are you ready?
I am. All right, so we've done similar sessions like these. Again, I'm very excited to see that Inova partnered with Rise. I'll go in a couple of minutes as to what would be the value of this partnership for you as a customer. But typically, if you're familiar with Inova seminars or webinars, you would know that somewhere in this session we would also like to introduce or talk a bit about Inova, and that's often where I come in. If you've joined us on site sessions, for instance, with Nestor and myself, you would see that schedule as well. And I wanted to give a bit of an insight as to what of how we want to be of value to you. First of all, let me direct to for most of you may very well know Inova from. This is our expertise and knowledge in Microsoft subscriptions and licensing and the ease of doing business with Inova. We take pride in our knowledge. We've come from a background where we support Microsoft structures in volume licensing. And about 10 years ago, when Microsoft introduced new models, we immediately stepped in that opportunity with Microsoft as well and start developing an online store wherein our customers could very easily manage their subscriptions, acquire, change, etc. Let me quickly demo this portal to you for the people that have not been using it so far. There we go. Well, this is basically your admin site. So the Inova store uses your 365 credentials. As you can see here, my nickname, so I'm using this particular account. This is a demo account, so you're not seeing any other customers' information here. It's just the Inova Cloud experience for you to experience a bit of the store of Inova. This is an example. Here you would find all your subscriptions that you would have via Inova. If you're using Inova as your vendor, you would be able to find your subscriptions here. You manage your account details, which are important for people that need to receive an invoice or make any changes within your environment. So these are all self-service elements within the Inova store and in the Inova portal. Oh, well, I'm not going to provide any feedback now. I'll do that later. And herein you will also find the store where you could find any of your subscriptions or even on-premise licenses should you want to acquire those. For those who don't know yet, this is all based on what Microsoft called CSP, the Cloud Solution Partner. And not only subscriptions can be bought here. You could do an easy search, for instance, if you look for Microsoft 365 E5. You can not only get the subscriptions through the Inova portal, but also the, oh, there you go. Now that we just, there we go. So you could find everything subscription-based, but also your on-premise licensing, for instance, for a SQL. If you're looking for SQL Server, I'm just giving out an example here. The portal also allows you to acquire your on-premise licenses as well. These are just quick examples. I'd be more than happy to further demo this portal for you if you're not using it yet and you're interested in acquiring subscriptions in a much more convenient way. So then be happy to demo this further. An additional component that we want to point out in this portal is that you can submit service requests directly. So you could create any ticket within the Inova support structure that lands at a dispatcher and then would get assigned to a proper engineer that can help you with the incident that you may be experiencing. So that's in a glance what the Inova portal is. We really focus a lot on making or doing business with Inova should be easy and convenient. This is the idea behind this portal. You may know us from enterprise agreement type, and we always take pride in the quick response times. And this is also the reason why we now developed this in a portal for customers to do it themselves. Yep. Let me then go back now to my pages, stop this and start another. Right, so I wanted to also address a bit of the additional value that Inova can bring for you as a customer beyond the transactional part of subscriptions and licensing. You may be familiar, if you've been working in the business for a while, that Microsoft used to have terminology for partners in gold and silver type of partner status. You could get a gold in workspaces and desktop, or in a silver partner in learning, a gold in data center, all kinds of things. Microsoft retired that terminology, that partner program as such. They replace that now with what they call designations. You could also call these solution areas. There are 6 designations that a partner can specialize in, and it basically tells the customer, or the way that you can acquire designations are by performance. That means that you have to demonstrate to Microsoft that you've done particular projects within that particular designation. You need to demonstrate your skill set through training and certification of your staff, and then also by customer references and growth. That means basically customer success, what Microsoft is measuring. And these components will result in the capabilities for you as a partner, us as a partner, to demonstrate or to acquire particular designations. You see the 6 designations in front of you. They're on infrastructure, data and AI, digital and app, modern work, security, and business applications. And as you can see, 3 of those are really focused on infrastructure and Azure. And then the modern work, security, and business applications are more different types of solution areas. Inova is proud to have acquired already 5 of these 6 designations. This is a quick glance what we see in the Microsoft Partner Center. And as you can see, 5 of the 6 are green lit, so that means that Inova is enrolled. We got a couple of more points to acquire on security to bring that to 100 as well. So we're very proud. This means that we can demonstrate our skill set so that we have the people that are certified to and be qualified to help you with any of your projects and different types of services that we can provide for you. And this is a demonstration to you as a customer that we indeed possess that particular skill set. The business application side, we don't possess that, and we don't expect that to happen anytime soon, because the larger part of the business applications is really around dynamics. And you probably know that Microsoft Dynamics is a very vast solution set that requires a lot of different types of expertise, and that has never have been really the Inova focus. However, we do work with business partners that are specialized in Dynamics only. So should you be an Inova or interested in working with Inova, we can definitely partner up and bring our business partners in the conversation so that we can assist you in, for instance, implementing something like Business Central. So if you're interested and looking into implementing business applications from the Dynamics side, then we can still definitely help you. But I would always work through a business partner. The other component within the business application side is Power Platform. And therein, we are very actively currently working on developing applications, business process automation, things like Power BI, business intelligence solutions. So therein, we do acquire these points. So you'll see that we are halfway with business applications. We'll probably be halfway for a while. But as I said, we're very proud of having obtained all the other specializations or designations, and these solution areas should resonate with you. You may wonder then what type of services that we can provide within each of these designations. Well, this is how we position the services within each of the designations. This is more or less what I always see the life cycle of any application or implementation of a solution within your organization. So it could be anything from a Power Apps type of application. It could be a security application that you want to deploy, or it could be a migration from any workload from your data center to Azure, or on the modern work side. It always comes back to a start and finish, or the more or less life cycle of any particular implementation. So we've divided this into 5 pillars, wherein we see the start of any implementation would be some sort of an assessment. You would want to investigate and review what you currently have and where you want to go. That's the consultant tab of the services that we provide. Once we have that in place and we've determined where we want to go, we'll obviously do that together with you. We can determine what the implementation would look like. So that is actually something that we do a lot. A lot of customers are still very much so on the brink of migrating from on-premise to cloud, and could be an email solution. That's often the start of any migration to cloud, but it also often is for Azure workloads, or typical workloads from on-prem to Azure. So that happens in the implementation section. Once you would have implemented it, you also want to make sure that your users and your IT staff are familiar with those solutions. We gather that under the header of adoption. And we do feel that adoption is a very key element of success of any implementation. You could give your users all kinds of fancy solutions, but if they have no clue how to work with it and they still use Word as a typewriter, then that is not resulting in a successful implementation. And then the business may ask where that investment in that solution has gone. So training, adoption, doing workshops, making user familiar with any solution that you're implementing is important. Then once that is in place, we can provide support structures. Now, we have had managed services for security in the past, but I'm very excited that RISE has partnered with Inova, because RISE is able to bring that managed service portfolio of the partnership much further than we used to do it in the past. So this way, it's a beautiful complementary service that RISE will provide in our portfolio from Inova already. And it really goes beyond security, goes to the managed services for much more. So we'll definitely be communicating to you more service capabilities in that field from not only security managed services, but also further infrastructure managed services. And then last, the usage optimization, that we see that in the old days, as we say that. This service comes from us from licensing. We had in the past a lot of customers that would have been over licensed. They would acquire licenses and not sure if they're under license, over license, where they would be with compliance. So we did a lot of these type of services for licensing under the title SAM, Software Asset Management. But we now see that there's also a huge demand on the Azure usage, for instance. A lot of customers start using Azure and start deploying workloads and resources, but not so familiar how to most optimize that particular deployment. And then months in that project, see that the consumption goes up quickly, and with it, obviously, the rise of the costs of that particular consumption. And this is where we can come in to assess your current infrastructure in Azure and see where you can do things smarter and, for instance, work with scaling, other optimizing tools, use different type of resources. So Azure has a lot of components in there that can help you make more effective use of the Azure resources to a more affordable rate, and not just fully deploy all. And we often see that particular with a lift and shift type of project. So optimizing within Azure is very big in demand at this moment, and we can help you do that. That is it in the overview of the Inova services. Want to give you a couple of examples of our customers that we've recently been working with. Commonwealth Bank in the Bahamas is an interesting one where we help them migrate from their on-premise notes environment to 365 in the cloud. You can imagine for a bank with all their parameters and security requirements, on-prem to cloud, but also from two different backgrounds, having to adjust the capability and knowledge of the IT staff, as well as the users, because they had to start working with different types of solutions on their workstations. That was a very interesting project to execute. Some other names that may resonate: CARICOM obviously has been customer with Inova for many years. They've also came from an on-premise to a temporary managed, I should say, more data center type of cloud environment to a full 365 migration, which we helped them do. And then other customers, Bahamas Air is also on that same type of trajectory from on-premise, but then from Exchange to 365, and now expanding it in things like document management in SharePoint and looking at particular application development in the Power Platform. And then Anguilla, the government of Anguilla. This is the logo for the government of Anguilla. Also a long year customer. I named these names as well because you may find the references to the customer stories online in the Inova website, wherein we have a conversation with the contact persons within this within these accounts, and wherein they explain how Inova helped them with particular projects and transitions and migrations and so forth. So then this is why I was referring to these customers. Obviously, we have a very long list of customers, and if I would put them all here, the page would be completely filled. That's it for me in a brief overview. The why is Inova. We want to be obviously your partner in acquiring your entry into Microsoft, acquiring subscriptions and licensing. But I think as a start of any project, you would want first do some sort of evaluation and assessment where you are and where you want to go. And at that point, I think we want to already be your conversation partner to help you with that and bring that forward. That's it for me.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So if we are short on time, let's step on the accelerator a little bit. If you can move to the next slide. I want to review briefly what Gilbert mentioned and sort of reiterate that our IT landscape is more complex today than likely ever before. So in the olden days, we just had to worry about keeping a nice perimeter. We set up those Cisco firewalls, that Fortinet in high availability mode, and control the users you created. Wham, bam, you're done. Your data is safe, it's secure, it's in a single place. But more and more, we have, well, more. We have more and more data being created by more and more applications that we use every single day, and we need to worry about securing that data. These applications live in more and more places. They're no longer in a group of servers that sit in my basement or in a closet somewhere. They can be on-premise, in a private cloud, in my public cloud. They can be in a SaaS provider's data center, strewn somewhere halfway across the world. And I also have more dangers and more complexity. There are more threats than ever before. There are, according to statistics, 1,287 password attacks every second. That is mind-blowing. This is more than 111 million password attacks a day. And we also have more and more compliance requirements, regulations that organizations have to meet, data privacy and other types of laws that apply to how I handle these applications and this data. And something else is happening that hasn't quite happened before. If we can move to the next slide and click once, and that is that as our world becomes more globalized and more connected, more and more small and large organizations are facing the same threats. So how can we protect against these? How can large organizations manage their complexity in order to make sure they are well and truly protected? And how can small organizations be able to access the tools that they need, potentially with more limited resources, to ensure that they are also safe? It's very common to hear IT leaders ask the question in our next slide, where and how do I start? And what we're going to look at is practical solutions in 3 areas. They're going to be grouped in a type of checklist that you can actually go through later when the slides are shared, and to see where we start, what the second step would be, and sort of what a more advanced step would look like. And those 3 areas we want to look at are identities. And we want to look at identities because they've become our new perimeter. As we mentioned before, we would just worry about that firewall and that network that we have in our office, but that's no longer the case. Our employees can be accessing data that is in many different locations, and the key to that data and to keeping it secure is more likely than not a user and password combo. Hopefully, some sort of other method or factor of authentication as well. So how can we keep these keys to the kingdom safe? We also want to look at applications. Given that applications can now live in so many different places, how can I protect them regardless of where that data lives? And finally, with the AI boom, as Gilbert highlighted, there is a very important topic of compliance and governance that I need to keep in mind. So how can I leverage those AI tools to be able to keep pace with my competitors, but do it in a safe and secure way, in a manner that I can maintain that governance and compliance according to the increasing regulations I need to meet? Let's look first at identities. And as we mentioned, we want to start with, well, the beginning. And you'll see the first point there is probably very, very basic. And yet we find that there are so many people, so many organizations who still don't have multi-factor authentication rolled out to all of their administrators. Even fewer who have multi-factor authentication rolled out to all their users. So is it basic? Yes, very. But apparently we struggle with that. So a very important key point, if you do not have MFA, please have MFA. But there's more things that we can do. There are tools within several different applications, not just Microsoft 365, to enable conditional access policies. And these are policies that can look at different factors that indicate risk and then require more or less factors of authentication based on dynamic risk that is being measured. So if someone is signing in from my office on a device that I own, hey, probably only username and password is fine. But maybe they're signing in from a location I don't recognize. Still a trusted device, but a location I wouldn't typically see them in. Maybe they're on business travel. Well, now I want at least one more factor of authentication, maybe a challenge sent to their authenticator app. Maybe they're on an untrusted device and in a location that I don't recognize. Or maybe then I completely block the sign-in. Maybe I even block the account until the user can answer an authentication challenge on their authenticator and resets their password. These are all policies that I can have that dynamically detect and react appropriately to sign-in risk. We should also make sure we're following the principle of least privileged access. And again, this is basic, but something we find is often overlooked. Yes, I have people who would need administrator access, but do they need the highest level of administrator access? More and more, my applications have granular admin permissions that I can give my users to really only have the permissions they need to execute their specific tasks. If someone's tasks are around user help desk management, resetting passwords, then do they really need access to administer email mailboxes? Likely not. So let's make sure we're only assigning users the permissions they explicitly need and that we are reviewing those permissions because users' roles and responsibilities may change. What's an intermediate step? Well, we can go even further through things like privileged access management. And these are tools that allow me to have automated workflows where when users require greater access, they can request that access. And if it's not particularly high risk, and it can be granted automatically. If it is higher risk, then someone, a human, has to actually go in, look, approve or deny, and maybe even add comments to explain that decision. This will allow us to make sure that whenever roles are granted, there is a specific and valid business case for them. We can also make sure, because our data lives in different places, that our identities are one and the same. Even though we have applications that may be in the cloud, others that are on-premise, the more we have users balancing different usernames and passwords, the more likely we're going to face password reuse or basic and easy to guess passwords. So let's leverage hybrid identity to make sure that our users only have one identity to manage. We can extend that to third-party SaaS applications by using things like single sign-on. As a long-term goal, consider passwordless technologies, things like FIDO keys or biometric sign-in, where we don't have to rely on users remembering a password. We can also consider things like just-in-time access, where no one has privileged access by default. A specific number of users can activate privileged access for themselves, but even then, only for a fixed time period. And that can also, again, help me mitigate risk. And finally, I want to be able to continuously monitor my policies and my identities, and see if there are any risky behaviors corresponding to those identities. Are there signing attempts from an unexpected place? Does a user that typically only work with one group of resources suddenly trying to access other resources? These types of risky behaviors can be highlighted and detected by automated tools and help me mitigate threats before they become a real issue. Let's talk applications next. I realize I'm going a bit fast. I'm hoping to catch up on the time we missed. There will be a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So for applications, one thing we need to understand is the number of applications and data that we're using is ever increasing. However, something very interesting happened when we polled about the use of AI. A lot of people replied that they weren't using it, and we commented that it's likely that they were using it personally and not as an organization. And that could be happening more than we think, not just with AI. And that is, users are finding that either they don't understand how to do what they want to do with the apps that corporate has provided, or they simply cannot do what they want to do with the apps that corporate has provided. And so they begin, of their own volition, to look for other apps to meet this process. This is called shadow IT. And more often than not, it can lead to corporate data being put into places where I don't have control. So a good place to start is understanding what line of business apps I'm currently using and trying to detect, and again, there are tools to do this, any sort of shadow IT, any sort of ungoverned app usage within my organization. I can then try and work with users to understand why they're using these tools. Is it a lack of training? Or does my tool really not provide the use case that they need? Should that then lead me to evaluate or to consider replacing tools? Once I understand what tools I'm actually going to use and to provide my users, I can work with vendors to adopt their own security best practices. Now, these may not be exactly aligned to industry best practices, but they're often a good first step and relatively easy to implement. Finally, when we find applications that are and are not allowed, we should whitelist or blacklist, either whitelist the approved apps or blacklist the disallowed ones, to ensure that users aren't using applications that I cannot control. What's next? Well, make sure then that your vendor best practices are aligned to industry best practices. And if not, work with your vendors or IT providers to ensure that you have a way to adopt industry best practices for data security. And these can come from frameworks like the NIST cybersecurity frameworks, like the Center for Internet Security, critical security controls. There are a number of frameworks I can adopt that will allow me to follow best practices. We also look at implementing SSO here because, as we mentioned, these applications may live in different places. However, if I have a centralized repository to control, monitor, and secure my identities, then I will be better positioned to control the data that exists within these applications as well. And we also want to deploy device management. So it is true that many of these applications may live in clouds, in browsers, and by simply controlling those browsers, I would have control over those applications to a certain extent. But it may also be that users are pulling data to their own devices and doing stuff with it there, pulling it outside of the cloud where I have control and into their on-premise device. Deploying device management tools would allow me to understand shadow IT in that context and control the data that may live on those devices as well. As a long-term goal, ensure that your security policies can be applied across all of your applications, whether they exist in your networks, on your people's devices, in a public cloud, or through public SaaS applications. And there are a number of tools that allow me to do cybersecurity posture management with popular SaaS applications. In M365, Defender for Cloud Applications has connectors to over 35,000 SaaS applications and can allow me to ensure that I'm monitoring for potential risk across even external SaaS providers, tools like Salesforce, AMS 360, and that I can deploy security policies to secure data even in those external applications. We also want to integrate SIEM. And for those who may not know what this is, it is essentially a tool that allows me to feed logs from any of my applications, my antiviruses, my identity tools and platforms, feed all of those logs into a centralized tool that then allows me to identify factors of risk, indicators of compromise across different platforms. This allows me to more quickly react to threats if they do come into my environment. And so I can notice that my routers are talking about strange traffic at the same time that Microsoft 365 is reporting a sign-in from an unusual location. Both of those indicators together may really make me think, ooh, I may have been breached, and may allow me to act more quickly to isolate any compromised devices and identities. But what about AI and compliance? Well, in order to remain compliant with AI, a very important point is to understand what my data estate looks like. One of the challenges of AI tools is that they are very good at surfacing information, better than humans. And so it may surface information that I don't want surfaced. So how do I control that? Well, we have to start by assessing and discovering my data sources. What types of data do I have in my organization? Where do they live? How is access to them controlled? I should understand what type of data it is and what applicable regulations apply to it. Is it health data? Is it personally identifiable information? What restrictions or regulations apply to that type of information? And then I should map out the gaps. If I should be treating the information one way, but I'm treating it another, how do I remediate that? First step is understanding that. Once I have that map in place, then we need to start mitigating those risks and bridging those gaps. So we need to classify data based on your business rules, requirements, and regulations that may apply to it. We need to make sure what data can be shared externally, what data cannot, even internally, who should have access to what, and ensure that there are restrictions in place to protect highly sensitive data. And make sure you have things like DLP tools to make sure that that data is not leaked outside accidentally. As a long-term goal, we want to have tools that are able to automatically crawl, search, identify, and classify my data, regardless of where it lives. So I can ensure compliance across all data sources, whether they're on people's devices, whether they're in a public cloud, a private cloud, a SaaS application, whether they're on personal devices, if I'm allowing users to use those to manage corporate data. And once I have that data properly classified, then let's not restrict AI use. It's a powerful tool. So deploy it intelligently with these restrictions in place so that you can then leverage the value of that business data. Now, we talked about a lot, and really it might seem a little bit overwhelming. So where do we go next? Well, we want to start with some good news. And the good news is that, as we saw from the poll, a lot of you already use Microsoft 365. And this means that a lot of you already have the tools you need to begin going through these checklists and checking items off. What's more good news is that Inova Solutions can help you. So we can help you first by giving you the resources to plan. And after this webinar, we'll make available some resources, some checklists you can actually go through to look at your current M365 configuration and ensure that you are following these best practices. One of them will even allow you to make sure that you are aligning to the Center for Internet Security's critical control or critical security controls, so that you are adopting those industry best practices. If you need even more help, then we can help you in the process. We can help you assess and discover, so you can understand where you currently are versus industry best practices and how to bridge any potential gaps. We can do that through services like our cloud security assessment or our Copilot security assessment. We can then help you implement the features or tools you require to actually bridge those gaps. So if we need to deploy MFA, if we need to deploy DLP, if we need to deploy data classification, we can help you do that. Finally, we can help you continuously monitor your IT estate to detect and stop any active threats. And so we have services like Guardian 360 Data Defender that allow us to help you monitor your identities continuously. And through our new partnership with Rise, we can even help you implement and deploy services like SIEM or SD-WAN powered by Azure to help you bridge multiple different locations, and then monitor those locations and those on-premise devices as well through our managed services offering.